Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith. Interesting matchup, last major boxing event of 2020. We haven't seen Canelo since last year because of issues with Golden Boy and Dawson. I know it's the zone, but it's Dawson. It's Dawson. Don't spell it D-A-Z and expect us to think it's the zone. Canelo was able to get out of his contract for Golden Boy in November, was able to clear up negotiations and get back into the ring with the super middleweight champ, Callum Smith, who took the fight on 4 weeks' notice. 4 weeks' notice, he took this fight against Canelo Alvarez, who's been training, who trains like a monster, a beast. And not that Callum was not training, but when you're training for a Canelo Alvarez and for 4 weeks, I think there's something different there because you know a monster is coming. Canelo's not the average super middleweight, junior middleweight. He's not the average middleweight. Right? Canelo is something else. And so it was interesting to see what Callum Smith could do. And interestingly enough, the walkout, right? I know some of the commentators talked about this where Smith is a champ. He walked out first. And they had an issue with it because the champ usually should walk out second. Why is that an issue? It's Canelo, right? You have your superstar walk out second. And the whole Bruce Buffer, virtual Bruce Buffer, I'm sorry, Michael Buffer, I'm thinking UFC. The virtual Michael Buffer was really weird too, where he Caballeros, he has that little bit of the Spanish when he's introducing Canelo. It was just weird. The fans weren't really feeling it, which even with the 15,000 fans and them being at 1/3 capacity, they were still really loud. Then they had the other announcer, the B-side, David Diamante, I got to Michael Buffer come in and do the announcing. And then the crowd started getting juiced up. It was interesting. And even for me, I was like, okay, I'm not there, and I know what it feels like to be in these major events and thousands of fans screaming. And there's something different about MMA from boxing as well. There's still that energy from MMA fights, whether it's UFC or Bellator or World Series of Fighting or other promotions. There is this electricity there, but boxing feels a little bit different. There seems to be a little bit more amped upness when you have these two guys throwing hands and just coming forward. So when I heard the B-side announcer start announcing Callum Mundo Smith, and then Canelo Alvarez, Saul Canelo Alvarez, like, oh, I heard the fans, and they even like, they were like, okay, virtual Michael Buffer, we're good on you. We want to hear it live. As far as how the fight went down, it kind of went the way I thought. Canelo came out very, very calculated. I mean, Callum Smith had a huge height advantage on Canelo, 6'3" versus 5'8", which would be, let's do our math here, 5'9", 10, 11, 12, 6-inch difference. So we had a good half a foot on Canelo, and Canelo was just biding his time coming in. And what I was surprised about was Callum didn't use his length to keep Canelo off. He let Canelo come forward, and yeah, he was throwing his shots, but he didn't stick and then move. He kind of like would make himself smaller, stayed in the pocket, then he started moving around. Wasn't sure what the strategy was for that, and I know that's probably that's the way that he's known for. But then again, his brother Liam Smith fought Canelo, so they knew what they were getting in for. It wasn't like this was their first rodeo. So it was interesting to see kind of what he was trying to do. Initially, I saw him maybe win one round in the first 6 rounds, and he did decently, but then he started getting these back and forth with Canelo, which is never a good thing. And Canelo, as the rounds went on, he got stronger. He started hitting harder. He started throwing more combinations. And at first, he wasn't throwing his uppercut. Canelo would come in, throw that looping left hook, left to the body, right straight, and then he started throwing some uppercuts, which really was affecting Callum Smith. I could see Callum was rocked, he was hurt, but he was such a tough fighter. I know some of the announcers were saying maybe they should think about stopping the fight. I don't think Callum was in that type of danger of being damaged. Yes, he was hurt. Yes, he was battered. Yes, he was beaten up. But it wasn't that much of a beatdown. I mean, yeah, Canelo beat him up. There's no question that he was bloody. Blood was on his shorts. But he still had that fighting chance. I mean, he's not known as a knockout artist. Smith does have knockouts under his belt. But he was still game. He was still able to throw some punches. And I think for him, the moral victory was making it to the 12th round. And I saw Canelo right around round 9 start to look for the finish. Round 10, he looked for the finish, 11, 12. And Smith was just a game opponent. I'm not sure that Canelo would have gotten it, even if Smith would have had more time or less time, or if Canelo would have had more time to know exactly who his opponent was. But nonetheless, Canelo looked really good. He was able to, he's getting better. I mean, he's 30 years old. They're both 30 years old. He has such great movement. I mean, Callum Smith will throw monster left hooks and Canelo will be out of the way. And Canelo would even like pivot, look in another direction and know he was out of harm's way. So his improvement has just gone way up. After the fight, they're asking him who he wants. I mean, there's a list of guys that he could potentially have. Andrade is one of them, and then Triple G just won his fight, so that would be, he said if the fans want it. And then there was Errol Spence saying that he would come up potentially and fight Canelo at 160. Canelo fought Smith at 168. I'm not sure if he would want to come down, but wouldn't that be a crazy fight? Errol Spence versus Canelo? Or it would be Canelo versus Errol Spence, and it doesn't seem like Errol wants, or Errol or Crawford. That's not going to seem like a matchup that's going to be made anytime soon, just because of the politics and boxing. Though that should be next in line, and it's not. What would be more interesting than that? Canelo versus Errol Spence. That'd be a crazy matchup because the punches would come a lot. There'd be a lot more output coming from a 47 pounder coming up, and Canelo able to use more of his punches. I think with the bigger guys, he bides his time, waits to come in. But I love Errol Spence. I just think Canelo a little bit too big for him. And Canelo could take punches. He could take punches like no other. He's never been knocked down. I've never seen Canelo hurt. He has a different type of mojo about him. So Errol Spence's power, even though he does have a lot of power, is going to get mitigated by a lot of things there. Still would be fun to see, never say never, but that would be an interesting matchup coming up in the future.